This is the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast with Dr. Julie Capell, episode number 286. Hey there, everyone. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I really appreciate it. Before we get into this interview with Len Bruskowitz, I want to let you know that I'm working to get more blog content onto my website and also my blogger site. I have both. My blogger site has the majority of my blogs on it. My website, not so many, because when I switched websites, I didn't pull them all over. But anyway, if there's something that you particularly want me to cover, some problem that you're having in vet med or something that you think I haven't talked about before, please send me a message and let me know. If you're not already on my email list, you can get on it to receive all my announcements by visiting my website or message me on social media or just send me a simple email. If I don't answer your email, it's not intentional. It may have gone into my spam folder, so be sure to follow up. I answer every email that you send. And so if you're not getting a response from me, don't feel discouraged. Just reach out again and hopefully I'll get it. Also, if you have not gotten your copy of my book, please go to Amazon and check it out. I am working soon on an audio version, but that's probably going to take a little while. The information in this book will help you navigate everything better in life, especially your veterinary life. So anyway, reach out to me. I really want to talk to all of you every week. I just love knowing that you're out there. My email address is jacappelldvm@gmail.com, and my website is theveterinarylifecoach.com. Also, I want to let you know something exciting. I was honored to record a podcast recently for AVMA's My Veterinary Life podcast with Doctors Marcy Kirk and Annie Chavant. That episode should be coming out soon. They told me the end of June, maybe July. So if you want to hear more from me, if you're not sick of my voice, look for the My Veterinary Life podcast. It comes out through the AVMA, and you'll hear an episode with me. And on a more personal note, I just want to say that I love pickleball. It's amazing, and I'm becoming addicted to it. Maybe I already am. If you like to play, let me know so we can discuss and geek out to all the pickleball stories and things. I was just taking a lesson this morning before I recorded this podcast, and every time I take a lesson or play a game, I learn a lot about myself and others, and it's so much fun. So if you haven't tried pickleball, go ahead and do it and let me know what you think. Okay, please enjoy this podcast with Len Bruskowitz. Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful and interesting guest for you. His name is Len Bruskowitz, and he is a business coach and certified exit planning advisor. He helps business owners plan and execute a successful transition of their company to a family member, a third party, or their employees on their timeline and their terms. He works with people to increase the value of their business and reduce the stress that comes with exit planning. Welcome to the podcast, Len. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great. I love business, as my listeners know. I'm kind of a business junkie, so I think this is going to be fun. And hopefully some of our veterinarians out there that are thinking about buying a business or are already in business will learn some things from you.
Yeah, and so as much as I focus on exit planning, really my thoughts are exit planning or exit strategy equals business strategy. So even if you're just getting started in your business, these are things you still should be thinking about because they're really going to help you set your business up, for an ongoing basis, as well as if you do decide to move on to your next great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not ingrained in business, and most veterinarians aren't, they don't teach us that in school. It's really something that will help if they listen to your tips and kind of start working now, even if they're not ready to sell, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you're right, and that's part of the whole exit strategy thing is nobody ever teaches it. you can go to all the classes you want on starting a business, running a business, but very few people teach you how to get your business ready to exit, and that's what I'm here to do today.
Yeah, and we all have to do that eventually. So whether you think you're going to get older or not, you are.
That's what I've said before. Is as much as people want to run this forever, nobody has yet. So
No, 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 none of us came out alive, right? So
correct.
I always ask every person on my podcast to tell me their story. So if you can start wherever you want to start and tell me how you got to where you are today, I love hearing those stories.
Great. So my story starts, 3 generations back. I'm a third generation small business owner. Both my grandparents ran businesses. My parents ran a business, and now here I am today. But I took a little bit of a circuitous route to it. So I worked at companies. I had about a 30+ year career in high tech companies, almost exclusively working at places that targeted small businesses as their customers, which is my passion. So I worked at places like Intuit and Constant Contact and Grasshopper, all who really target small business as their customer. So I feel like I understand the challenges of running a business, and now I'm doing it for myself as well. So I worked for some small companies that became big companies. I worked for some small companies that stayed small. And really, at the end of the day, I decided, corporate life was just no longer for me. And so I looked back and I said, what I really enjoyed doing was coaching and mentoring both colleagues and people at other companies that I worked with. So it was pretty natural for me to go into coaching. And I started off as very general business coach. But one of my early clients was a 72-year-old woman who had started a very successful retail business with her husband over 50 years ago. And he unfortunately passed away. And she was, as much as she was involved with the business, didn't know everything about it. And
Mm,
it was causing her a lot of stress because she didn't know what was going to happen to it. And she
right.
said, I want to have a plan by the time I'm 75. And I said, wow, that's great. I hope to be having planning out
Right,
years.
right. At 75.
Right. But working with her, I figured, we came up with a plan, and she's now, on a path. And the big aha for me was when I first started talking to her, is she said, Len, I can't sleep at night because I don't know what's going to happen to my business. And then after we figured out her path, she said, Len, I can sleep at night. And to me, that was, really touched me. And I said, I think I found my niche. And
Yeah.
that's why I focused on exit planning as my area, because again, there's so little information about it, and I want to change that.
Yeah. I love that because it is a really scary thing and a lonely thing. Because when you're thinking about selling a business, you really can't spread that around to your team or, it's kind of almost like a secret thing I found. And that's really kind of isolating and lonely. So to have someone like you on your side would be really valuable. So what is it about people that they don't think about exit strategies? Is it us like putting our head in the sand or what makes us not want to think about that?
I think there are a couple of reasons. A couple of reasons why business owners don't think about exit planning as early as they should. The first one is that they think it's complex and confusing. And to be honest with you, there are components of it that are, but I would say, like almost any problem that you deal with, if you just start, if you just start, you'll make progress, you'll get some confidence, and you'll be able to take on the whole process. But you start with small pieces, right? So that's my first piece of advice: is don't be overwhelmed. Pick a part that you can start on, and I'm going to talk about what some of those things might be, but start, because you build confidence once you have success. But really, the biggest thing, the biggest reason that I think people don't get involved early on enough with the exit planning process is the business is so closely tied to their identity.
Mm,
And so that's really hard for people to get, separation from. And I know why, right? So when you work at a company, you go, you do your stuff, you come home, and that's kind of it, right? You get your paycheck. The people around you may rely on you, but that's kind of it. when you own a small business, I like to talk about how that has such an impact, not only on you as the business owner, but your family, your customers or clients, your employees, your vendors, and your community. So
Mm,
think about small businesses. I think, I'm sure you're in this space where you're embedded in the community. You're the one that's donating to the, float for the parade, or you're donating to a robotics club at the high school, those kinds of things. So you're really
right.
embedded, and your identity is really tied
Hmm.
to your business. So that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that business owners have in terms of not wanting to do exit planning early enough.
Yeah. Is there a way then to teach us to think about that differently? Yeah, I know that still when I talk about my hospital has been sold. Like I own the building, but I no longer own the practice. I just do relief work there. But I still always talk about it as my practice and my employees and my clients, even though I have this separation now. Is there a way to help people think differently about it so they can let go of that identity piece?
There are a few things that I work with business owners to help them get separation. And one of the first things I do, and this sounds like it yields some difficult conversations, but one of the first things I do with a client is sit down and basically get a professional business valuation done. So how much is their business worth today?
Mm,
And I also then talk to them about, what do you want when you retire? What kind of financial assets do you want when you retire? And the data suggests that about 80% of small business owners' financial assets are tied up in their business. So what that means is, if they don't harvest the value in their business, they're going to have a big gap between what they want and what they have today. And
right.
so you can make up a little bit of that gap with better investing and saving, but the real way to make it up is with the value of your business. So I think that's one of the first things that helps, is you sit there and you say, I have a lot invested in this company, and I need, I want to get something out of it. So that's one of the first ways. The big way that I work with to help get separation is really to start getting the business owner to do a couple things. One is to start documenting all the processes in their business. And
Mm,
so if you think about it, it's like, if somebody were to come in tomorrow, could somebody else run your business? And if the answer to that is no, then you've got to start taking steps. And what documenting your processes does, and documenting doesn't, it used to just be you had to write like long manuals and things like that. There are better ways to do that. You can do that via video, right? You can record
right.
a 5-minute video about how things work.
That's cool.
Yeah, what that does is it starts to now get you some separation from the business. Why? Because if you've documented how how your hospital or your office works, now you can take a vacation because somebody else can follow the procedures, right? I had
Mm,
a
yeah.
conversation with a friend of mine this past week, and I said, "What happens when you go on vacation?" And he said, "I still have to do everything myself." And I was like, that's a problem,
That's not good.
right?
Yeah,
That is not
absolutely.
good. I said, we need
Not
to
good
start
for your
working.
business and not good for your life, right?
Exactly. So those are some of the big ways, having those processes documented help with separation. And the third one is really to start thinking about what you want to do next. And this is a question that a potential buyer of your business is going to ask. What are you going to do when you sell? And having a great answer to that. And so I'll give you examples. I'll give you a bad example and a good example.
Okay, great.
A, a bad example would be, I'm going to travel and play golf. I'll tell you from experience, that is not a good plan, because traveling gets old. Playing, you can only play so much golf, right?
Right.
A better answer, and this is just, a better answer would be, I have 4 grandkids in Phoenix. I'm going to move to be closer to them, and I'm going to volunteer at a nonprofit that I'm going to start, or I'm going to, commit to working at this veterinary hospital on a pro bono basis. That's a plan, right?
Right.
I'm going to play golf and travel is not a plan. So doing that, thinking through what's next is another great way, because now you have something to look forward to that's different than running your business.
And
So
that
hopefully those are helpful.
that helps pull you away emotionally. Yeah, because I talk to many veterinarians when I'm coaching them that are either wanting to leave or thinking about leaving, or, having some kind of idea that they want to sell their business, and they really don't know what they're going to do. And they're so wrapped up in that hospital, identity, and just having a place to kind of spend your energy and spend your mental and physical energy. And I don't think that they always realize how hard that is to walk away from.
I agree. And that's where, your kind of coaching comes in to help them think about what's next. I mean, that's an important part of it. And again, it's because business owners fixate on their businesses, which is the right thing to do,
Right.
but it's not healthy, right? You do need that separation. And in order, again, if you want to reap what you've built in that business, you've got to get it in a place where somebody else can run it.
Yeah. So, are there more reasons that you think that we fear learning about getting out of our businesses before I move on to my next question? I mean, I know why, because I had to navigate all of that on my own, and I work with people that do. But are there other unique things that you see?
I think I've hit on the big ones.
Okay.
The other one is that some business owners, and this is totally valid, love what they do, right?
I
They
do.
love, but most of them, I'm not going to generalize here, but most of them love being the technician. They love doing what their business does. But
Yeah.
what they don't love is all the other stuff, right?
Right.
The
Right.
account the accounting, the maybe the hiring, the training, all the administrative pieces.
Right.
And so that's much easier. One of the things to do is, start to get rid of those things, right? Find other people that are
Yeah.
really good at those things. Yeah. So then you can spend your time, you have more time to think about other things, but you can spend your time doing what you really love.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how then, I don't know if this is the next logical question, but how do you know how much your business is worth? Like, how, I know you can hire someone to tell you that, but you still have to do your own work, right?
Yeah, so there are professional business valuation services available. My company offers them. And what that does is looks at your financial records. So you typically looks at 2 or 3 years of your financial statements. And then it's also an interview that basically says, ask you some questions. So how much of this revenue do you think will continue? How much is at risk? How much is recurring, right? So, do you have plans with your patient, with, I guess not with your patients, with your
We call
custom
them clients.
clients. Okay. Do
The
you,
people are the clients and the animals are the patients.
right. So you
That's
don't
our
have,
vernacular.
okay, I'll stick with that. So, do you have plan? Do you have plans with your clients where they come in on a regular basis? That's much better than when it's just kind of a random one-off visit, right? So potential buyers love that there's a recurring piece to their business, right? So that's another part of the interview. And so what'll happen is, once that business valuation is done, and I do have a way on my website where your clients could come in about 10 or 15 minutes, get a basic idea. It's not a fully fleshed out, but they'll get a basic idea of what their business is worth, as well as some ideas for the pieces that they're missing. Like, what are the pieces they're not doing that could
Right.
increase the value of their business. So
Okay.
that's always a great level setting, though, is just to have an idea of what is it worth today. And it's sometimes a really awkward conversation because clients think that their business is worth a lot more than it is sometimes. I've worked on this for 30 years. It's got to be worth N
Yeah.
million.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's
It's
not worth
not.
that.
Yeah.
Right. The good news is that with time, you can build it. You can increase the value of your company.
So how do you do that? I
Yeah.
guess
So, yeah.
that's the
So,
next question. How do we
sure.
increase the value? As
Okay.
everyone should
So,
be doing that, even if they're not getting ready to sell, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of my key points is don't think of exit strategy as having a point in time. Think about it as a way to build value in your company today and tomorrow.
Beautiful.
So before I go into how to increase the value, let me talk real quickly about how value is determined.
Yes.
So so I talked about, yeah, you can get a professional valuation done. What does that mean? For most businesses in your vertical space, in the veterinary space, the value of the business is based on the earnings that it's generating, so the profits it's generating, and it's typically a multiple of those earnings. So let me just give you a real simple example. For maybe an average company, if they're doing profit of, let's say, $500,000 a year, okay, that's after everything. A multiple might be 3 times earnings. So the value might be 1.5 million for a average company in the space. Okay, so that's kind of how valuations are done. It's not so much on revenue, it's mostly on profits.
Right.
So it's typically a multiple of profits. And there's some calculations done. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's not necessarily what you report on your tax return. There are some adjustments made. So average company, 3 times earnings, valuation of say 1.5 million. If you were to focus on the things that really drive value, and there are a number of things. When I work with clients, I go through a list of things, and we rank everything as kind of red, yellow, or green. And this is things like, is your revenue recurring, or is it one time? Do you have a great brand name? Do you have a great reputation in your area? On the negative side, do you have lawsuits that are pending against your practice? So that we kind of
Let's
yeah,
hope
we kind
not.
of I know, but we asked the
That gives
question,
me
right?
the shivers. It's like we don't want lawsuits.
But I asked the question because a potential buyer is going to
Sure.
ask that question, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so what that does is then we get these kind of grades on all of these categories, and then we can start to work on them, right? And
Right.
start to say, let's do more of this and less of that. And so a lot of what building value is focusing on what you're really good at, right? So
Mm.
I'll just pick an example. You may have some really expensive equipment in your practice that you only use once a year, right? Is it worth having that, or should you focus on the business that's driving most of your revenue and profits, right? So that's
Right.
just a simple example. And so what that can do is that can ultimately, focusing on all those things that are important, can increase your multiple from the 3 in our example to maybe 5 times, right? So now
Mm.
the value of your company goes from
Goes
a
up.
million and a half dollars to $2.5 million, right? So that's the kinds of things I work on with clients. And just know that the way the company is valued is on earnings and how likely those earnings are going to continue in the future, right? So
Right.
there, so if there are risk factors like a lawsuit in my example, that would bring down the multiple, right?
Right.
If your revenue is guaranteed almost, then that would lower the risk and increase the multiple.
Yeah.
So, hopefully a really simple example, but just kind of how companies are valued and then the things you can do to increase the valuation.
Right. And when you say profits, just to get really simple, because some people might not know anything about this, the profits are what you report on your taxes, but also if you're the owner, things like the extra salary you're taking, management fees, like that kind of gets pulled out, right? So,
Yeah, it actually gets added back.
Right,
because
right,
for somebody else, if somebody else bought the business, they wouldn't be continuing to pay your salary or to lease your car or whatever business expenses you run through,
right.
personal expenses you run through. So those are added back. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next thing was you were going to tell us about what things do we have to have in place
Yeah.
before we start to think about selling? Am
Yeah.
I going in the right order? All
Perfect. No,
right.
this
I
is
don't want to I don't want to mess up the train of thought, but
nah,
because
nah.
as a business owner, like, okay, we need to have profit. Well, what does that mean? Like, how do we get that profit better, maybe is a better question, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do we
So
get
let
that
me talk
value
about
up?
let me talk about the four big things that I work with clients on. And even before I work with clients, these are the four things that every business owner should be working on.
I
Okay.
love. Yep.
The first thing is your business strategy. So I've hinted at some of this. Companies that are growing their profitability are much more attractive than those that are not. So this comes down to, you know, again, focus on the places where you're better than anybody else and go hard on those. And on those periphery things, I use an example. It's not great in the veterinary space, but I use the example of I have clients who, when I look at their profitability by customer segment, we look at a group and I say, you're generating revenue here, but you're losing money on these people. What's going on here? And I'll get them. Well, they were one of my early clients, and I don't want to.
I give them a discount.
Yeah, you know, as you need to move on, right? Like again, a
Get over
company
it.
who's buying that doesn't want to inherit your old unprofitable customers, right?
I love that.
So it's really about, you know, getting focused on the things in it. And it's also things like getting your name out there. You know, if you're an expert in an area, get out and speak about it so that you become viewed as an expert. That's going to help you build your case of the value of your company. Okay. So really business strategy, trying to figure out a way to grow, um, is number one. Okay.
So let
Um,
me ask you a
oh,
quick question before you go to number two.
yeah,
And and this is just to kind of try to simplify this for if people aren't getting it. But so what you're saying is that if my business is a little bit more profitable each year, it's going to be easier to sell than a business that's either flat or is going a little bit down each year.
absolutely.
Even if the one going down is a bigger practice, let's say. So those
Yes,
that you really have to concentrate on, am I getting a little bit better each year? Even if it's an old, long-standing practice and it's a slow growth, that's better than one that's trickling down.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Growth is
I probably didn't
always,
need to say that, but
no,
I'm
no,
trying to
I think it's
simplify
good clarification.
it. Okay.
And you know, there, if your practice is declining, there may be good reasons for that, right?
Right.
And that's okay as long as you can explain them. You may say, hey, look, I did what, you know, I did what Len suggested. I got rid of some clients that were generating revenue but not generating profit. So my revenue is down, but I've got
Right.
a healthier base now. And
Right.
now it's going to grow. Okay.
Right.
So that was one,
Okay.
business
That's number
strategy.
one. Business
Number
strategy.
two, number two is record keeping.
We all hate that
Yes,
because we have to
but
keep records on our clients, but I know what you're saying. Okay.
so the thing that will ruin the potential for your business to be purchased faster than almost anything else is not having accurate accounting records and customer records. All right. So what this means, it goes deeper than that. It also means that you, as the business owner, understand your metrics. What are the pieces that drive your business? And I get it. Most veterinarians probably are not financial wizards, right? They didn't go to school for accounting and tax and finance. But you have to be able to understand how your business, what the business drivers are. Okay.
Hmm.
So If you don't, then you need to fix that starting soon. So one of the reasons when somebody comes and says, how long does it take to get my business ready to transition? I typically say 2 to 3 years minimum.
Okay.
Why? Because if you don't have some great accounting practices, it takes time to fix those. You can't solve some of those things overnight. So having implementing, better accounting systems, maybe hiring a CPA rather than a bookkeeper, some of those things that just take time. But it goes beyond just accounting records. It goes to, as I said, what are the metrics that drive your business? Which again, most bookkeepers and accountants don't really tell you, right? They just
Right.
say, here's your tax return.
Right.
But this is really about, hey, on average, this is how much we make per client, and knowing that and knowing how that's changed over time. That's a really important thing to be able to have those conversations. Okay.
Awesome.
Number three, this is going to harken back to what I talked about earlier. You've got to have other people that can run your business for you. Otherwise, you can never leave.
Right.
So, understandably, a small veterinary practice is not going to have a team of 75 people, right? It might only be 4 or 5 people. But what you need is the processes in place so that others can pitch in and do things when you're not there or when somebody else takes over. Okay. And you talked about it earlier. This is a little bit of a tricky thing because you want to be open with your employees about what your plans are, but you also don't want to scare them away, right?
Right.
So how does that work? I think at some point you need to be honest with your employees and say, hey, look, I want to create, I'm going to be moving on in projected some number of years. I want to build this business to be as great as it can, because if it's great, nobody's going to want to change it, right? And
Right.
you will have greater roles and everything else.
Purity. Yeah.
So being upfront is hard because you do run that risk, but I would argue that that may be an opportunity. You may have an employee that will raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to take over. I'd like to, so that may raise opportunities. It also may scare people away. And you just have to take that risk at some point, because having employees know what your vision is, what your plan is, and bought into it is really important. So
Mm.
I understand there's the dichotomy of not wanting to say and wanting to share, but at some
Right.
point you have to be able to say, this is where we're going, and is everybody on board? And if they're not on board, they should probably leave right away anyway, because
Yeah. They're not what you want.
they're not contributing, right?
Right.
So that is a big piece on the management side. It's really just being able to build another layer who can do more of what the business owner does on a day-to-day basis. Number four, we've talked about this earlier. Personal, having a personal plan, okay?
Mm.
Knowing what you want to do after. And some of this is involved, one of the things I really recommend early on is getting that business valuation done. The other is a really in-depth conversation with your financial advisor, estate planner, wealth manager, whoever, because what you really want to figure out is, how much do I have today? How much do I want? And what is that gap? And then how are we going to fill that gap? Right. But most importantly is just having that personal plan of what you're going to do after, so that you can get separation from your business. So those are my 4 things to start working on. Again, you don't need to hire me yet, maybe, but you should always be thinking about these 4 pieces, because and the reason I say exit planning doesn't have a specific end date is, you may be very happy running your practice, but somebody may come along and say, you know what, I'm willing to pay you a lot of money for your practice, and if you haven't done these 4 things, you're going to have to say, wait.
Wait, I got to figure out if I really want to do this.
Well, and oh, by the way, my accounting records are a little bit of a mess,
Yeah.
and And so what you want is you always want to be ready, right? Even if you don't have plans to exit, you may be incredibly happy. But if you're doing these four things, your business is going to be likely more profitable. You're going to have more time, right, to
Right.
enjoy running your business. And you're going to have this flexibility that if somebody does come along, or if you just decide there's something you want to do more,
Right. If something
you
happens in your
have that.
family and you need time away, and there are a lot of reasons that you might want to sell your business on
Yeah.
the, kind of at the last minute because something happens to your health or your family's health, or like there's a lot of, or you have to move to a different city. You might have to sell your practice, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, there's a bit of a depressing fact that I just want to share because it's reality.
Yeah.
There are, we call them the 5 Ds. And
Oh, yes. I love
the
this. I've
five
heard this before.
yeah, the 5 Ds contribute to 50% of business transitions that are involuntary. In other
Yeah.
words, when these things happen now, the 5 Ds are death, disability, divorce, disagreements, and distress. So death, disability, divorce, pretty clear.
Right.
Disagreements can happen between partners, right? If there are partners
Yes.
in a practice,
Yeah.
one wants to sell, the other doesn't, or potentially one of the partners dies or becomes disabled and the other partner doesn't want to deal with the spouse of the first.
Right.
There are all kinds
Yeah.
of
That
disagreements.
can happen. Sure.
Distress is, the pandemic is a great example of distress, right?
Right.
But when those 5 things happen, again, that causes half the businesses in the US to transition involuntarily, like their fire sales or they're shut down, right?
Right.
And so having an exit plan and working on these 4 things doesn't mean those 5 Ds aren't going to happen. They're still going to happen. But having a plan in place can just make them a lot less traumatic, right? If you've got a plan that says, hey, if something happens to me, you know, A, B, C, D happen, that's way better than something happens and now people are looking around with no idea what to do, no understanding of the business. That's when it really can be traumatic. And again, it's traumatic not just to the owner, but family, employees, vendors, customers, community.
Right. And that kind of goes back to that step where you said to get your records in order and have other people able to run your hospital if you're away. Because then these 5 Ds, I mean, death obviously you can't you can't come back from. But if you were to go through a divorce or you were to go through, some issue that you had to step away from the business temporarily, it could run without you
That's
successfully.
the goal. That's
Yes,
the
you
goal.
don't
And
lose
again,
it.
it's one of the other goals to this is going back to my friend, like you could actually take a vacation and enjoy it rather
Yes.
than still being tied to your business.
Yeah.
I have a quick story that kind of shows what happens when you don't have a plan. This was
Okay.
obviously not a client of mine, but a very successful solo practitioner lawyer here in the Boston area where I live. 15 years, built up a practice, fortunately got ill and died, and did not have solid accounting records, did not have solid business records. His family had no idea who he owed money to, who owed him money. He hadn't filed taxes for a couple of years. So they had to go out and
Yes.
hire forensic accountants and lawyers and to figure out what was going on. And this ended up costing them over $70,000 just in fees to get the records figured out. Like they didn't even have a password, so they
Right.
couldn't get into any of his acts.
Wow.
So that $70,000 went to, you know lawyers and accountants rather than to the estate.
Yes.
So it's a horrible case study, right? It's
Right.
the worst scenario, but that's what can happen if he had a plan. Like there would have been an orderly transition to the estate.
Right.
So ironic, given lawyers you'd think would have thought that through, but
Yeah.
that's the downside of not having a plan.
Yeah. And it's so important because when you're an owner, a hospital owner, I know for me, it was like I just always wanted to own my own hospital. So once I did, I was just happy. And I was just like, I'm just running this place, trying to make money, trying to do it right, trying to take care of my team and my family. But you don't always have that vision that someday this isn't going to be your job anymore. And you're going to have to somehow give it up. And you're also investing all this time and energy into it that you want to get some kind of return on that investment. And I don't think we always think that way. I know I didn't for years. I was just like doing my thing and raising my kids and running my business. And I had no thoughts of ever not doing it. And then you wake up and you're older and people start asking you when you're going to retire. And you're like, oh, I never considered, that that would someday happen to me. So I think it's really important, no matter what age you are, whether you currently own your practice or you want to own a practice or, you're in between, that you think this way.
I agree. So a question back for you. What parts of owning the business did you enjoy the most, and which did you enjoy the least?
I think I enjoyed the people, like the team, and trying to solve their issues and, provide them with a stable work environment and a job that they loved and were able to make enough money to live on. I loved that part of it. I really did love the business part of it. For some reason, I enjoyed that, although I didn't like necessarily the paperwork part of it. Like when I had to sit down and do sales taxes and send those in, or when I first bought my business, I did my own payroll. I didn't like that. I didn't necessarily like hiring and firing, even though I did it. So the HR part of it, I didn't really enjoy. So I think it was more taking care of the clients, taking care of the pets, taking care of the people, because I'm very people oriented, and that was all combined. But the nitty-gritty details, I didn't love. Like my dad did my accounting for me for years because he was an accountant. So I had that built-in accounting guy to do my bookkeeping. And I struggled every time I got the records together to send to him. Every time he called me, we got to look for this, $50 because something's missing. And we'd spend hours like combing through because he found every penny. But that part I didn't always enjoy.
Makes sense, and it tracks pretty well with most business owners want to do the technical parts of why they open the business and not
Right.
the administrative minutia. The good news for you and for I'm sure a lot of the people listening is that it's relatively easy to find skilled people to do the parts that you don't want to do
Right.
because they are technical but not they don't require the skill set that you have, right? So if you think
Right.
about it, just a really quick example, if you think about a kind of three levels of running a business, the first is the kind of visionary, like where are we going, what are we going to do? It's very forward looking, right? And that's where most business owners should be spending a lot of their time. The middle tier is the kind of managerial tier, which is, looking back, like what happened last month, what are the stats, important, but again, that's something that is lower value in my mind. And then the third level is really the technician. This is in the weeds, what is right in front of me. And for practices like yours, the veterinarians like doing that part, and you did too. But it sounds like you were much more at the higher visionary level. But it needs to be a combination of those three things. And
Right.
where you run into trouble as a business owner is if you're spending too much time in the technician layer, because that's really just doing the day to day and not thinking about the future and planning. And that's the high value task. So
Right.
I think you've done a great job of being able to move between those levels. But for everybody listening and watching, that's a big piece of, you've got to think about the future, look at the past, and then the day to day, all in proportion.
Yeah. Yes. To stay in all those three areas. So, what have I not asked you that I should, or that you think is important that we didn't talk about so far?
We've covered a lot, so I appreciate your questions. You've gotten a fair bit of what I wanted to talk about. I think I would have one more bit of advice, just a hint and tip. you may have experienced this podcast and say, I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, it
And
is overwhelming to think about. It really is,
yeah,
especially when you're currently running your business because there's a lot going on.
exactly. So my word of advice is to pick 2 to 3 things in your business where you just sense something's not right. Pick 2 to 3 things and focus on those for the next 90 days. Don't try and solve 10 issues.
Right.
And don't have them be things that are going to take a year to fix. 2 to 3 things where you can have a measurable impact in the next 90 days. Why do I suggest that? Because like I said earlier, just start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Starting somewhere, getting a little bit of success will then make you want to go on to the next 2 or 3 things. Okay,
Right.
so that's
Yeah, you'll
that's
create
my one bit
momentum.
of it. Yep, one
Yeah.
bit of it. The second and final bit of advice is, if, and it may be related, if you find that one of the things that you're doing today is not adding value to your business, stop. Just
Drop it.
stop doing it. Yeah, just
Yeah.
stop doing it. It will, you know, relieve a burden off of you, and will give you more time to think about the things that are really going to help you grow your business. So if there are those things where you just say, I don't know why we're doing this, just stop.
Like boarding. That was one of the things that we were doing for a while is boarding. But then boarding of animals got to be such a business of its own that it didn't make sense for a veterinary hospital to do that. And it's very hard to let those kind of things go. But when you really look at then you can take that energy and put it into what you do well. It really makes a lot of sense. And it'll disappoint a few clients and you'll get a little bit of grumbling, but it won't last long and then it'll all go away and you won't have to do that anymore. That's just an example that I can think of because we did that for a while and we were like, why are we boarding? That doesn't make any sense. We don't have the facilities, we don't have the manpower, we don't have people here all night. Why are we doing this? So,
So perfect example, and I'm guessing it was hard because it was revenue, right, that you were
right,
generating,
right. You think you're giving up money.
but you probably weren't making that much money at it, and it took away from, like I talked about earlier, focus on the things that you're really really good at, that you can
Right.
do better than anybody else. My guess is you were not the best boarding facility in your area, right? You
Yeah.
did it because it so narrowing your focus to what you're really really good at is the right thing to do, and that's what I encourage everybody who's participating here to think about those 1 or 2 things that, you know they may just be a hassle, and so just get rid of them.
I love that. That's great advice. So tell everyone where they can find you, where they can read more about your business and what you do, or if they're thinking about selling and they want to find someone to help them think this through, that they could contact you.
Yeah, the best way to get in contact with me is through my website, which is greaterheightscoaching.com. So greater HEIGHTS, greaterheightscoaching.com.
Got it.
And up in the right hand corner, there's that business valuation calculator I talked about. It's free, takes about
Awesome.
10 minutes, and it'll give you just a decent sense for what your business is worth today. And then again, it gives you 10 or 12 areas that you can improve on. And it actually estimates what amount of value that would add to your business if you were to
Mm,
implement those things.
love
So
that. Yeah, and then you can see those numbers in real time and motivate yourself to start working at it, right?
exactly. And again, 10
Yeah.
minutes, it's free. That's what I would encourage everybody to do if they're thinking about it. And even if you're not thinking I think it's just kind of fun to say, gee, what is this worth today? It may surprise you, hopefully to the positive.
Yes, hopefully the positive. And if it's negative, then it gives you motivation to get working on it, right?
It's better
Might give
in
you a
my
kick in
opinion,
the
it's
pants.
it's better to know, right? Because
Right.
again, as I mentioned, it's a horrible conversation for me to have when somebody's thinking it's worth 10 million and I'm saying it's worth 1 million, right?
And you're like,
That's
wah,
not
wah,
fun.
wah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Think again.
exactly.
Think again. Yeah. Well, hopefully that won't happen to anyone listening to this podcast if they
I
have
hope
a
not.
business. I hope their businesses are all worth more than they think they're worth right now. I love that. Well, this has been super fun and interesting, and it went by really fast. I really appreciate you being here. It was a great conversation. And if anyone has any questions, reach out to Len or reach out to me and I'll get you in touch with him. And if you have anything that you really want us to talk about again, let me know and I'll have him back.
Great. Thanks, Julie. I really enjoyed my time.
I love this. Thank you so much. This is Len Bruskowitz. Did I say that right?
That's perfect.
All right, everyone have a beautiful week and thanks for listening. Bye. Bye, Len.